Yes, and that's the preemption right now is that basically even while 11 have telepathic powers, like even then like with like careers right in front of 11, like 11 right now, so he even think that like careers won't get any better. Like I'm looking like definitely this would be that for them specific demand of rendition that like careers right now will be only putting on fake acting in front of 11. Because like I'm looking that we careers from careers point of view, like careers might have already recognized it, like and I'm sitting them as a skill that like careers will be most likely due to that have the experience on like careers back when careers was working at like Mechanical or like a person like getting rejected from up leaving like Mechanical and like after like a great number of years passing like everything like usually careers might have to like the after effects of that and the might have developed like the ability of like future sites certainly not the name. So like I'm looking at that areas might have even foreseen like the current present where like 11 would be like showing up to like the race home trying to like make some of but like I'm looking like the race right now would be constantly putting on a fake act to it off so that like the race might not only see in the future that basically because like my different impressions are like the race might not only see like the future where like it's the race right now accept that at 11 of Jane and her daughter Ben like Jane won't be like at all willing to like leave aside. So like if that happens then basically that Owen's and like the remaining members of that Owen's like number three would be like eventually finding out about like 11 having still survived and would be capturing 11 from like the races we're taking 11 away and once again impersonate 11 like just might be like oh like a future like power plant like careers will be like secretly having like careers might have been as an eventual future it's definitely never things so like to avoid such a like avoid such a like future like I'm looking careers right now would be only putting on a fake act in front of 11 and then looking careers might have seen like the ultimate future where like if careers right now like only put on a fake act in front of 11 then 11 would be eventually ending up returning back to that Hopper and Lecter might have seen like citizen of like Hopper plays that social and important role in like basically eventually bringing down like Owens and that the remaining members of like Owens team and everything and like bring down and shutting down like the energy level and everything and so that like they will Hopper like that eventually happening in like the future and then Hopper himself like bringing 11 of James back to the real side so that like it will be at that point that 11 will be actually safe and will be able to like safely and properly live with like careers. This might be like an alternate future, like the proper exact future, like the desired future that basically careers might have seen already using computer side power. So like I'm looking to like make this exact future become a reality. Careers might right now with it only putting on a fake at in front of like 11 her daughter same as it like she doesn't recognize James. It's like my doctor impression. So like another lecture is might be having like some sort of like on the protect her future like sector is might be also having some sort of like empathy I mean like a telepathy blocking like blockage or like barrier setup like kind of like powers that careers may be having which like I'm looking like even though 11 is like right in front of like careers right now and 11 have self powers like I'm looking at still 11 while reading 11 might have only tried to like read the race might while right like 11 is like right in front of the race right now with the 11 the building but like I'm looking like the only thing 11 might have been doing using telepathic powers like the only thing 11 might have been able to like read through the race's mind might have been like avoid a total emptiness in that the race might just depending on the and that would be something that the race might have totally artificially created using her telepathic powers. Not telepathic powers, but like the race might be having her own moving powers, which like you might artificially that in like the presence of like 11 might have only fully empty ensure to like keep her mind in like an empty like void like kind of like a state to totally solely to totally trick 11 so that like 11 would be eventually thinking getting tricked into thinking that like the race won't might not recover and that way like for 11 to like take the decision to like not stay and like the race moment so that like 11 will be running back to towards like Hopper where like 11 currently will be safe and through so Hopper and through 11% with like Hopper like basically with that both of them protecting each other until like eventually Hopper quickly like bring down like the energy laboratory and like the remaining of like organizers like remaining things. So like at that point that Hopper himself would be like bring 11 back Jane back to luxurious, and so that like from that point, like Jane would be able to like live with luxurious. Luxurious would be able to like finally be her true self and basically won't have to like put off her fake and then be her true self and would be able to like express her emotions and basically be able to like live happily with her thoughts. It's definitely my personal impulsion as for like the current situation that might be totally going on with like careers. It's definitely a very much because you're definitely going very much right now with like careers. It's just right now sending element about like careers believing that like 11 is one by a different form. Like another thing like with like careers even showing like the route that like careers have decorated and for like 11 and all that. Like definitely my personal impression that like basically right now definitely career system would be like not wanting 11 to that leave. It's definitely my career system would be definitely wanting like careers or like 11 stay and live with them. It's definitely from this point on, it's definitely my preference. But like I'm still thinking about the position that like I'm looking like 11 right now. I'm just time would be getting that sudden alert kind of like the thing happening. The telepathic powers like I'm looking like affecting 11 slowly getting like enough kind of like the thing. But with like pop up being like the just like the scenario that I'm looking at that I'm looking would be what that process like elements to that probably self respond back to that career system that basically that she needs to leave and basically quickly running off to like say for like in the scenario that I'm about to talk, right? So like I'm looking maybe either such another kind of like a situation happening or like I'm looking like even totally maybe deciding to that maybe that feeling a little bit of guilt of that basically and that that breaking Hopper's role and basically that leaving without telling Hopper and all that like about maybe like event decide once again like using like the blindfold and deciding to like just check up on Hopper. Like because like definitely 11 would be like absolutely stuck on that basically by now Hopper would be extremely worried of like not finding 11 there at that also like I'm like 11 might decide might think of like this from career home like 11 like this is feeling that certain extent of like a guilt within her like I'm living like 11 like putting on like the blindfold and like within the dark void like searching for Hopper and at that point like 11 totally shock having that shock of like 11 totally finding out about like Hopper feeling this like underground trap like situation in like that underground upside down area and all that like 11 those people like at that point those people like 11 would be totally genuinely extremely worried for like how regardless I'm speaking about the principle that like regardless of like the fight with, that between like 11 that 11 had with like Hopper and all that like and those people like still 11 deep down would be seeing Hopper as like totally different from Emperor enough which definitely remember deep down definitely 11 would be having that feeling of like the father figure towards like Hopper definitely remember the principle. Uh, so that definitely was the conduct event only rushing in, running out at a way from that career system to that safe hopper like the scenario that I was recording. And I was definitely event only making it in time by the time that hopper within like that underground upside down area beneath that field like I was like as that hopper was struggling like I was into them definitely like as hopper will be desperately trying to like make it out of like the underground upside down area like I was looking like eventually one of like the faces monster like going up to the copper only. Or like a different like as like copper only really trying to make it out of like that underground upside down area like I'm like Hopper totally injuring himself and Hopper starting to like bleed at that point is like the scenario that I'm looking that instantly bringing like all those great number of monsters that will be present in that underground upside down maze like area like there will be like all sorts of like great number of like faceless monsters present there. So like I'm looking like but at the distance within that underground area. So like I'm looking that that one facing most of that would be close by to where Hopper, which is that I'm actively rushing it towards that Hopper. So in that Hopper is like the scenario that I'm doing, and that Hopper will be struggling against like that monster would be when and would be like simultaneously like number one would be like the exact time while Joyce as well as that Will and Mike will be making it to like the so and then specific remember mention that like that it's exact like basement like area in that the so where the person has like locked and trapped that like I'm looking that definitely that would be like beneath that basement would be exactly where like Hopper would be at that point struggling against this monster, especially when it's so like as like Joyce and like Mike and like Will, all of them would be struggling to like basically figure that solid ground, solid floor of like that basement like Julia area like then picking up like recognition and like that will still they would be like always struggling to like properly dig and make it towards like that underground area where like copper would be like not maybe beneath where like copper was struggling and so on. And like I'm looking to get that point that they would also like struggling to like save operator at that point that like I'm looking by the 11 would be like making it to that area and like still at that point like might getting like the biggest shock and it's 11 like I'm looking like you straight away using a superpowers and that uh, taking out like that monster and basically would do same pop-ups like the scenario that I'm looking at. Also my favorite is that like the faces monster of like stuff which like something has trapped in that basement area of the zone. Like I'm looking by the time like Jason, Mike, and Will bring that would be like showing up with their desperate desire to like save Hopper and like they would be like totally like ordering Dustin to like open up like that basement like I'm looking definitely Dustin's not allowing them to but like I'm looking them forcefully opening that basement door and like entering that basement that's like the store but like I'm looking by then like I'm looking like dark like the face monster dark would have um would have totally created like a portal on like the side of like sidewalk of that basement and might have left to like the barrel but by that it's the feeling of the premise. So like even though Dustin would be totally worried like by the time that Joyce will as well as like Mike will be entering into that basement like area to let's say offer like a meeting that basement like area was it already empty. So like no presence of dark there at all. It's like kind of a scenario that and that as well would be like a shock for like Dustin. It's also like an scenario that I'm looking at. Also, the feeling of the preemption is perfect. What would be that basically, even while 11 had basically made it from like Hawkins to like Sirius' home through like by traveling in that like I'm wondering that there is a scenario to could be like 11 like basically stopping you realizing that like Hopper is in like danger and at that point for 11 to be able to like quickly make it toward like the location where like Hopper would be in danger like to save Hopper like which I'm suggesting to my friend would be like at like Dustin's home area, the underground area, like the things always definitely my friends are fishing out. So like I'm saying they are like for 11 to be able to like quickly make it there from careers from a book for like most likely 11 using 11's like superpowers like basically on to like the ground to be able to like push ourselves to be able to like ascend and that way like 11 don't make flying while at the same time like I'm looking like 11 to like a certain extent like even remembering like the workings of cells as well that way like I'm looking maybe like 11 totally flying through like the form the area that would be there like I'm looking like 11 totally using up to a dark while darkness have superpowers onto like the ground like I'm looking like 11 like flying through like the form and like basically that way taking that short time that and I'm looking like 11 will be able to like move with like serious speed while directing like into the form onto like the ground and flying through such a manner while maintaining that low at altitude through like the force like I'm looking that way like I'm looking might be how like I'm looking like 11 will be able to like finally make it in time to like say pop up at like the almost like changing scenarios that I'm just all over again on the that's a like minimum condition right now with like multiple lines in like the rails home right now, blinking in like the sequential order that way like leading 11. But for like it will be precisely intended to like lead 11 and I would like that blinking of like the lights that like the rails home will be all shadows of like the rails herself. It's definitely memorable using like essentially using like the rails like power like like to get the rails herself that would be like causing like the for region of electrolytes at her home and it will be totally to like lead 11 away from her home. Like I was like not to like leave 11 away, eventually lead 11 away from her home, but like right now, who like the bringing of electrolytes, like I'm saying like right now the way to be like leading 11 through into like a specific direction in like the race at home. So that like basically 11 would be able to like and it would be totally to like leave 11 to like some sort of like a clue or like some sort of like an object that might remind 11 of like hopper. That's definitely one of the prevent. So I like 11 that way to like make 11 set up on hopper because they come to the definitely careers secretly well and fully aware of like the extreme danger situation in which like hopper is in and like I'm assuming careers might have also seen like the future where like it like basically right now at this very moment like basically 11 doesn't watch to that rush towards like Hawkins to like Hawkins to like save Hopper, then like Hopper ending up dying, but it was like Hopper ending up dying by the hands of like the basic monster, like just future unprecedented careers might not only see then beforehand is definitely going to put temperature. So like so at least to that get 11 away from laptop home and to get 11 as soon as possible towards like pop-up. Like say pop-up would be that's the reason for like I'm looking like the light at like careers from right now blaming it to the old careers do it. It's definitely my personal and prediction right now. Also, like, I'm still thinking about the impressions that basically with like careers right now, directing like 11 towards like careers and still repeating that very same words that careers have been repeating for a long time, like sunflower, rainbow, three to the right, like four to the left, like and possibly like I'm going to see like that instructions to that careers right now would be giving to like 11 so that like one that new careers might have seen the future and like seen like might have seen like the like broken careers like still be helping like 11 only shockingly finding out about like occurring dangers so that like at that point as like 11 will be rushing in to Hawkins to like save Hopper like at that point like for 11 to potentially quickly be able to like make it in time towards like where Hopper would be inside underground area in that trouble for like 11 to be able to quickly make it there like I'm going to give the directions that basically the close to like the direction should get 11 there would be what like the race through up to the side uh would be like repeating like as like a rainbow and some clubs because like I'm doing like near to that because like I'm in the government members going to bring Hopper will be right now in like the underground area at like around beneath like the home or like I'm bring like Hopper like exploring like the underground place and like as we will be trying to like escape like Hopper eventually once like Hopper will be getting into that field trouble against like the basic monster at that point of like Hopper will be exactly right beneath like dusting zone. So like I'm looking like near to like dusting zone, I'm definitely bring the sunflowers. And during that exact time, as like anyone will be rushing in and making it towards like dusting zone, like there will be like rainbows as well. And then like the three to the left and like the four to the right and like four to six, this will be all like close like to lead 11 towards like dusting home so that like 11 will be in like safe harbor. And the fact that like the race has been like repeating the exact same words for a while would be like precisely due to that the race definitely would be having that like future side flower. It's definitely my opinion that it's like to the 11 while definitely 11 right now won't be having like algorithms which like still like 11 as well will be like developing eventually in like the as like 11 goes of like algorithm like eventually in like a delayed manner like I'm like 11 as well algorithm maybe gaining like the a bit of like a future side power like literally like the changes or also like about to do that and I'm not going to remember. So is like listening and friendship right now with that absolutely work with like enjoy like my friend and Bob like basically using the method that them that really trying to like find out like the location of X in like the map of the like by the time they will be finding the location of X using the method they like them getting like the biggest shock with like the X location being at like exactly that's informed is like the interesting scenario that I'm looking for game of okay, so like me going through impression right now with like person right now rushing towards like my home to like tell Mike about which like border danger of like staff most of like number to bring like the clear different right now for like Mike's mother like telling Dustin that they really might have left to that which home like scenario that I'm looking at. So like Dustin from there like straight away rushing towards like Wilson and like by the time Dustin will be making it to like which home the clear was by then like the team of like Joyce Bob Mike and Will put out only that's Will's home. It's like the scenario that I'm looking. So like Will's home would be like totally closed and locked is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like that way Dustin not finding anyone there is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like at that point like I'm looking maybe Dustin then deciding to like even head over to like Lucas's home as well. It's like also like a buffalo that I'm looking. So like I'm looking by the time Dustin will be making it to like Lucas home that I'm looking like Lucas's son might be there. So like I'm saying like Lucas's mother like telling the step about like basically Lucas having gone to like gone out or like Lucas might have told her mother either like Lucas might have only told mother like he's just heading out or like he might have told his mother like he's heading off to like the arcade. So also like about the plan and everything. So like I'm saying like maybe that or like I'm saying like Lucas mother just telling nothing that Lucas has just head out. So like I'm looking like at that point it's absolutely totally fed up and I'm looking like Dustin deciding to like basically head back to his home and basically to wait until like Mike or like Mike or Lucas any one of them like or like will like fix up their radio phone like basically with that decision like I'm looking like Dustin will be like returning back to his home but like I'm looking while Dustin would be returning back to his like home at that point, like Dustin getting like the surprise of like the shop with like at that point I was wondering what Dustin would be seeing would be was like the group of like Will, Joyce, Bob, as well as like Mike like only trying to like open like the basement uh, basement area of like the smoke where like Dustin had like trapped Dustin like the scenario that I'm looking for like at that point like that would be like the biggest shock for like Dustin and Dustin would be trying to like those absolute best to like try to like stop them from opening that basement area. But like I was like by then like they would have only opened like the basement the door to like that basement area and like Dustin would be on the stop. But like I'm still remember to mention that like at that point like Dustin not finding dark in that basement area like was not it because like Buster Dark by then would have gained like the ability to like create portals and like especially since like Dustin had basically up and injured have attacked Dark so that basically trapped Dark into that basement like area like I'm going like Dark might have not want might have wanted at that point might have sort of angry and might have decided to like not have anything to do with like Dustin anymore. And and I remember like even while Dustin was like that and like hiding in that whole shed at the like home like with like Dark back then while Dark had was like walking towards that shed, like Dark might have been walking towards like Dustin, not to like attack Dustin, but with that absolute opposition towards like Dustin might be the case, might have been like the case, especially members of so like I was like it since like due to like Dustin's fear like Dustin attacking Dark like that might have only maybe angered Dark and might have been Dark might have only gotten sad and maybe even angry and disappointed towards like the at that point that like I'm sorry like at that point like by then like that might have gained like the power to like create portals so like I'm from the twin activation like that might have decided to like leave Dustin and so like that might have created like the portal on like one of the side walls of like the basement and left to like the parallel world might be what might have happened. Certainly on the revision so like but still have to bring like eventually in like the future I'm bring like there should be that reunion between like Dustin and that is like nothing like that, like eventually crossing paths in like the future, like can win the scenario that I'm going and definitely like that friendship between like nothing and that like basically getting restored as well in like the future, like the scenario that I'm going. And that was like the next time doesn't end up to be seeing each other like that would have reached like the transformative stage of like the humanoid like phase, the monster stage is like the scenario that I'm going to bring. I'm very efficient. And also my future impressions for like that eventual future of the union between like Dustin and Dark like Ambassador like would be most likely definitely Ambassador would be happening in not in like the real world but it would be most likely happening in like the parallel world where like Dustin and Mike and all of them would be like able to heading up to like the parallel world with like with like some sort of like an absolute mission and Ambassador like it could be doing then that Ambassador like Dustin and Dark would be like the next time would be crossing path next future in the near or like distant future, like in the scenario that I'm projecting and what's right. So also like the need one reimbursement right now, the like the Raves using of telekinesis powers to like bring 11 towards our and basically the sector Raves in front of like 11 like changing like the TV channel that and the different lecture Raves would be trying to like search for like a TV channel which would be like which would have the topic of like basically police focused topics, you know, definitely what the Raves would be right now. So things definitely will share this but I can like the Raves like only really finding that the channel and I'm looking like it would be like a police focused like topic or like a police focused news like I'm looking like would be what like in that channel that the race would be like really switching to and showing 11 is like the scenario that I'm doing that way instantly reminding 11 of like pop up definitely to do exactly that like what the race would be right now. I can think it's definitely a trend so that's what I'm personally really perfect right now so that have yes, so like actually my impression right now with like with me, like with my father, like basically through my father doesn't finding out about like Nancy being at like Annie's place. Like I'm literally like Annie was like Nancy's friend, so my friend. So like I'm looking definitely with like Steve as well showing up to like my phone. Like I'm looking like even before Steve would be uh no even before Steve would be even be able to like knock on the door of like my room. Like I'm looking like Dustin totally seeing Steve and Dustin totally like deciding to like use Steve's car to like basically to get to Alice's home because like Dustin would be only buying that like of Nancy that she's at Alice's place, especially on premise but like Dustin straight away telling Steve about like without even Steve being able to like knock on like and ask like Mike this time like I'm going even before that Dustin straight away telling Steve that basically that like Nancy is at Alice face like the scenario that I'm doing. Just like it would be obvious for like the that like Steve would might have only showed up for like looking for Nancy's definitely from that be like I was doing like and I was doing at that point for two possibilities because like I'm doing every time Nancy would be like going out to like meet with Steve as well. I'm doing it might be this very exact same like that Nancy might even say to her parents as well that like she has gone to like Alice's place. Also like about that I'm doing so like I'm doing two possibilities like that. That Steve believing that Nancy right now is at Annie's place, or like I'm looking still thinking along the lines of exactly that might have definitely been a lie by Nancy. That Nancy might have told to her parents that they will see that Annie's place in actuality, especially with like just recently itself, like basically Maxim's brother, like only frustrating like for Steve with like Nancy and Maxim's brother like talking about how like about like the friendship between like Nancy and Jonathan and everything. So like due to that insecurity within Steve, like maybe Steve only straight away come to the conclusion that basically like what Nancy might have told her parents as for her being at Alice place possibly being a like life and excuse for like Nancy to like go up to Jonathan's home. Might be along the lines of conclusion number three, maybe like without Steve finding out, maybe along the lines of like a conclusion that I'm looking for, maybe like Steve comes to and that way like I'm looking like even though Dustin might want to like Dustin would be like only attempting it with like charismatic way of speaking as well as like dominant kind of like certain kind of like a dominant kind of way of speaking to get into like Steve's car and to have Steve take Dustin to like Alice's place. Like I'm looking Steve is like basically like driving the car and taking driving towards like which place like the scenario that I'm feeling. So that's the scenario then I'm preferring like for like the scenario to be like maybe like as soon as like Dustin and Steve would be like with the three star would be making it to like making it to like Will's home like at that point says like the car belongs to like Joyce like basically and Jonathan, like all of them would be using that different art. So like that car, like only crying away with like such extreme shade from like Will's home might be what like Steve as well as like Dustin might be seeing from Dustin, like not about the that I'm doing. So like that way like I'm doing maybe like Steve thinking around like so like I'm wondering maybe at that point like Steve totally think that maybe that it might be like Nancy and Johnson that might be driving that car. So like I'm wondering like Steve totally chasing after that car. So like I'm looking at like the group of that Bob, Joyce as well as like Will and Mike will be asking to find that X location in the map. Like I'm looking like then eventually ending up at like Dustin's home and like Steve as well as like Dustin will be following them with like Steve's car that will be also ending up at like Dustin's home. And at that point Dustin getting the biggest talk with like Mike and also trying to like because like I'm just like on reaching like the film I'm just like at that point like we're telling like George and all of them that basically offer a scrap and around like until my see it like sense that much so like I was doing like them only seeing this like underground basement like location in like that's the film like so like them quickly trying to like open up that basement kind of the door to that basement kind of like a location where like doesn't have like basically a trap that so like I'm doing nothing probably seeing that and I'm doing them totally opening the door and like them starting like take from that basement is like the one possible scenario that I'm doing. But like the difference would be so spin like even though the floor of like the basement would be like tougher like still I'm doing like trying to dig from like the lawn of like the home would be like any there would be like an extreme difference in that depth that they would have to dig from the so like I'm doing like that was like the scenario that I was doing. And that way like Steve as well as like stuff is showing up there and if it was like Steve slowly finding out at that point that like Nancy's not there. So like I'm going yeah like I'm going like George slowly maybe like falling out Steve at that point, Joyce was like Bob that calling out for Steve, and that was like them totally forcing Steve to like to help them just like the whole ticket. It's like the scenario that I'm looking at. That was definitely there will be that soft and like pure side towards Steve, which would be like totally listening to them, and basically it would be like even though the only thing in Steve's mind would be to like basically to find Nancy, like I was looking like Steve, like that empathetic side of like Steve, like considering in like Steve but totally helping them like big trying to like dig out that and say offer like from like the reason like the scenario that I'm looking. This is like the one possible scenario that I was looking for. The possible that scenario that I'm looking for. It was like the possible scenario that I was looking for like as like Dustin would be getting into like Steve's stuff from like Mike's home and like Dustin would want Steve to like take him through that Alice place, and Dustin would be totally telling Steve that basically Nancy is definitely at like Annie's place. So, but like definitely Steve might be totally it would be up and but Steve still feeling that basically like kind of it's like by Nancy, and basically Nancy might actually be at like Jonathan's place, but like don't perform like so like I'm doing at that point like Steve as well as like but Steve quickly trying the car towards like the smoke, and like they are like Steve by then like the other position scenario that I'm between is that by the time like Steve would be making it towards like Vince home, like by then like I'm sure the door would be locked. Seems like all of them would have left to find their ex location. So like I'm sure like at that point like I'm sure like Dustin totally telling like trying to like trick Steve, because like I'm looking from at that point from Dustin's point of view, Dustin would be totally think that basically Dustin would be totally feeling that the only other possible place were like Mike and Will and Luke would be most likely the at like the arcade place. It's like yet like Dustin would be feeling confused as like why they might have not taken Dustin with them. It's also like about the development. So yet like I'm doing like that would be the only thing in Dustin's mind to like to trick and use his stuff to like basically to get Steve to like drive and get Dustin to like the arcade. So like at that point I was like Dustin's totally trying to like doesn't only actually perceiving like freaking Steve's like the other possible scenario that I'm talking about, like nothing telling you that like oh that he remembers now that basically that Mike had told about like basically Nancy taking things to like arcade along the lines of the friend like maybe somehow like nothing maybe somehow managing to like Steve, and maybe like that way, like doesn't only confusing Steve is also like about the variable thing and confusing Steve into that with like the way of like speaking like computer person somehow managing to like confuse Steve into like maybe thinking that of like the possibility of like maybe Nancy being at like the arcade place. So like I'm doing that way nothing in Steve and getting Steve to like try Dustin to like the arcade place, and I'm doing there like I'm doing like Dustin totally they are within the arcade building like Dustin totally finding like Maxine and Lucas together, and then like Dustin would be totally finding like Lucas as like Dustin will be opening that door like everything like I think what Dustin would be seeing would be like Lucas telling Maxine about like all their biggest secret about like the battle world about like the urban village about like the battle world and about like the quote about like the missing of will disappearance of will and about like the facing monster and everything like Lucas slowly like explaining all this in detail to like Maxine would be what like Dustin would be seeing as like Dustin would be opening that door with to that home within the arcade. It's like the scenario that I was doing. So like definitely at that point like I'm like it's like quarrel between like Dustin as well as Lucas happening. And I was looking like that quarrel is resulting in like this the like them quarreling their way into like basically and I was like no even more than the quarrel like I was at that point but that's only also wanting to like tell Lucas about like the code, right? So like I'm thinking as they will be talking and as they will be like leaving the arcade place like I'm along with that night like at that point I was like at that point like not much time to be uh, uh, Justin will be taking not much time until like they will be all interacting and literally like sitting out of like the arcade place. So like that place that at that point like Steve as well will be in there. So like I'm looking at that point will be when like I'm looking like an active sort of the whole year returning back to like the arcade place to like pick up Maxine. So like at that point like I'm looking like Maxine from the getting extremely angry seeing like Lucas with like Maxine, Lucas and Justin with like Maxine. So like I'm looking at definitely like Maxine's product and basically threaten Maxine to like not speak to like Lucas like I'm looking like it will be like the same feeling in like Max's brother's mind towards like Rafin as well. Remember correct. Like I'm doing like Max's brother getting angry with like Maxine and I'm doing Max's brother straight away like so walking towards like Lucas and like I'm doing like Max's brother trying to like bully for Lucas like what to do that I was doing. And at that point like I'm supposed to like Dustin to like only defend and try to like protect Lucas and talking back to that Max's brother like the scenario that I was doing. And that way at that point I was like the crazy Maxine like counter like only attacking like Dustin is like the scenario that I'm doing. And at that point, like even though Maxine would be trying to like stop her brother, like I'm doing like her brother probably losing control. And at that point, is when I'm doing maybe like Steve would be like only. So like I'm doing at that point, like Steve might be like not aware of all this happening. So like I'm doing like all of the like Steve hearing all the sound from nearby, and then Steve only seeing like Matthew's brother like totally going out of control and like basically attacking that the attacking Dustin and Lucas and all that. Like I'm definitely putting that definitely like the empathetic side of like Steve totally kicking in that Steve totally rushing into like protect like the kids and I'm like at that point like I'm like totally once again like Maxine's like sort of like totally like bullying trying to like irritate Steve and like I'm also bringing that like I'm also bringing that will be like finally the thing in like like that would be like that last drop for like Steve and it would be like the yeah, like Maxine's brother would be going over that limit as like he would be making fun of like Steve at that point. That I'm looking at that point like Steve totally being that absolute hero and I'm looking like Steve trying to put some protect like Dustin as well as Lucas from Maxine's brother by Steve attacking Maxine's brother at that point, like the scenario that I'm looking at. But like I'm looking still Maxine's brother would be like far too stronger than Steve that I'm looking like even though Steve would be like putting like everything into that fight like I'm looking like Maxine's brother like without much difficulty at all like totally conquering it defeating and badly injuring Steve and badly attacking and injuring Steve and like Maxine's brother like hopefully like pulling Maxine like the stuff Maxine away and like forcefully taking Maxine away. It's like the scenario that I'm assuming. So like I'm assuming as like Maxine would be forcefully taken away, like I'm assuming Maxine looking back and like Maxine totally feeling that absolute regret and absolute Maxine would be sit down feeling so extremely bad takedown because of like her brother's like villainous kind of like behavior because like Maxine would be pulled away by Maxine's brother and would be taken out of like the arcade area in like Maxine's brother's car like and Maxine right then would be turning back and seeing like the badly injured Dustin Lucas as well as Steve like the scenario that I'm looking at. I was looking from that point on the police come to the like Steve to totally be like definitely Lucas as well as Justin totally seeing Steve as this like hero figure. Like I'm looking their image of Steve until that point will be totally changing and I'm looking like total bond good bond of like friendship being formed between like Lucas and Justin towards like Steve's like personality that I'm looking and I'm looking Steve as well like totally reciprocating that feeling of friendship towards like Justin as well as Lucas to as a friend like the scenario that I'm looking. That way like a certain extent of like a tiny bit of like a bond of like friendship being formed between like Lucas like Dustin as well as Steve and like they would all be having that common target of like an enemy in like Maxine's product. Just like in the scenario that I'm observing and able to manage. Okay, so like happening on the current picture right now with like the vines of like the underground upside downs right now like taking hold of like Hopper and basically Hopper being trapped and like basically with like the vines all over his body. Like I'm looking definitely even though with like the reveal right now that like Hopper still in that like pumpkin like underground area and like that pumpkin shade that like I'm looking still like the vines under the community like transporting through that underground upside down area like I'm putting the vines to be transporting Hopper is like the scenario that I'm doing until like reaching this like locating like the underground area beneath that basement area of like the zone. That would be where like Hopper will be eventually ending up in. It's definitely my greatest. And I was wondering like at that point like beneath like in like the underground area beneath like the basement area of like the dome and this like the situation of Hopper and the like would be eventually ending up with like such a situation where like the vines would be like putting Hopper in such a trap like situation exactly like how uh, Hopper as well as Joyce had found Will that while they had saved Will from like the bad boy but that thing over like Will's mouth like I'm doing like Hopper as well being put into like a similar kind of like a situation by like the wine is like a possible scenario that I'm looking. So like this would be all happening to Hopper while Hopper would be like beneath like the underground area of like the basement area of like Western Zone is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm doing right now, like without any great delay, I'm looking like the team of like George Pop will as well as Mike will be heading over to like the X location that will has through in like the map. But like I'm looking at they will be making their way, eventually making their way to the X location. I'm looking like will totally being able to like send like Hopper having been transported and moved from like the X location through like the underground area. So like I'm sort of like that way, like I'm will would be able to like sense like since like at that point like Hopper would be like nearby, like I'm will might be able to like sense like uh, Hopper's presence in like the exact direction of like Hopper's presence from that area. So like I'm thinking there like I'm thinking either like uh, the group of like Bob, Joyce, Will and Mike like either through like their vehicle, through their car, like I'm putting them heading over and with like will being a reflection hopper from the real world, like I'm putting them ending up at finally at like the home is like one possible scenario that I'm putting. Or like the other possible scenario that I'm putting is for like Will and their group like ending up finding eggs in that pumpkin field. But like I'm moving from there, like I'm doing them also spotting that area where like Hopper had dug out and had entered into like some upside down. So like I'm doing like there, like I'm doing like showing, even though like covered by the vines, like I'm doing still like Joyce and like Bob like totally digging it out and I'm doing them that way. Also like entering into like that underground that area. It's like the scenario that I'm looking like. So like they are like I'm them discovering that underground upside down and I'm looking through there like I'm looking like them searching for like copper and I'm looking there as well. I'm looking maybe will the next time will be able to like send like copper person I'm looking from the upside down area like I'm looking maybe like after entering into like the underground upside down area like I'm looking will's powers will be like gaining more strength and that way like will be able to like from the underground here I would be able to like, precisely send like the direction where like copper has been transported from like X location to like the underground area. So like I'm sure that way like it will totally run to like that through that exact direction through like the main of it that underground upside down area and with that box as well as George as well as Mike running along that will and I'm thinking them all finding like copper in this like exact trap state in which like Bill was found by Hopper and Joyce back during like back in like the parable. It's like the scenario that with that thing on top of now. So like I'm doing that way, like I'm doing them totally at that point, like saving Hopper is like that in the scenario that I'm looking. So like them saving Hopper and like I'm doing like as they would be like maybe trying to make the way back to like that area in like that underground area. So like they had that up so like the pumpkin field. Like I'm looking like by the time like they will be like entering through that pumpkin field type of area and will be moving through and trying to find Hopper itself. Like I'm doing once again like the vines will be closed in that area. So like I'm doing them without any light, like them not being able to like them as well totally losing their way. So like the Hopper situation. So like I'm doing them all collectively like the group of like Hopper, even after like saving Hopper, like I'm doing the group of like yet like I'm doing even at that point like Hopper would be barely conscious and barely conscious and he was struggling to move like the scenario that I'm doing. So like I'm doing like the group of like Hopper, Joyce, Bob, as well as like and so Bob and Buffering like definitely with like Buffering like Bob that's definitely contributing a lot in like that situation as well. And Buffering like even though Bob would be afraid like I'm Buffering like Bob would be like mustering up all the courage and I'm Buffering like Bob coming up with like all sorts of strategies which would be like to link them during their time in like while they would be trapped to survive what they do on their time they would get trapped in that underground area shutdown areas like in the scenario that I was looking. Yet like I'm looking like them struggling to find their way out. And I'm looking like eventually like I'm looking like the scenario to be like basically them as well, like exactly like copper situation like them as well, like the wines eventually catching up to them and I'm looking like either the wines catching up to all of them or like and capturing each and every single one of them and like or like I'm looking like them usually as they would be frantically searching and trying to like find a way out of like and escape from like the underground upside down like everything maybe like them totally running into like faceless monsters as well. So like the weapons there. So like I'm looking like them thoroughly usually in like that underground upside down area like them all collectively ending up in such a collectively trapped kind of like a situation where like they would be about to end up dying in that underground upside down area. And that would be when I'm finally like that is happening with like basically 11 making it being like that ultimate twist and I was like 11 using 11 like superpowers like destroying the ground and like showing up to like that underground upside down and developing that being like the moment where like the reuniting of like anniversary reuniting of like Mike and 11 would be happening. If like and developing that video day would be like 350 to stay. It's also like a limited scenario balance. So like 11 showing up and like it would be 11 showing up alone. That would be like saving all of them. It's like 11 using 11 special powers like destroying like the vines and if that case of monsters even show up to like try to like attack them like I'm doing like 11 taking the life of like the race. Destroying like the base monsters as well. Because like I'm doing like unlike that when 11 had used her superpowers back from like Hawkins Road where like 11 had basically been like the 11 had been like choosing like 11 super using 11 like superpower against like the matter 11 was extra for the from like the real world to like the parallel world. Here like I'm looking it to be like the concept like I'm looking with all these years passing like 11 might have practiced the power more and like that like 11's body as well will be like handle like up to the power right now way better as well as like 11 superpower as well with like 11's practice and everything like might have grown and choose more intensity as well, especially in the so like while like the power of the monsters, fifth monsters is still remaining same. So like I'm in like 11, like using 11 like to like destroying like the vines and like the monsters and 11 totally saving all of them and I'm like 11 totally pointing up superpower to like the ceiling area and I'm looking like that way like 11 totally escaping along with like and saving all of them and this with them all finally that they barely managing to like escape and they really returning back to like the real world from like the underground upside down, like things with scenario that I'm with all the topics and map in the real version. And definitely 11 at that point was seriously worried for Hopper. And I'm looking like from that point on, I'm looking like Hopper as well, exactly like going through like kind of like a similar situation as that will look like also like what that I'm Hopper as well, possibly like having like the uh, baby monsters like basically baby business monsters like slowly growing from within Hopper as well. So also like an eventual possible that scenario that happens that way Hopper as well gaining like ability to like see like the parallel world from like the real world is like very the scenario that way Hopper as well gaining like with powers is also like an eventual possible scenario that happens and much to and with that with Hopper gaining that power like Hopper totally using that power to just like advantage. Even though initially Hopper only were like everything like Hopper really using all that powers to his like advantage to further make progress in this like attempt to like basically to destroy like this like parallel world that predict into like the real world and everything like I'm just like Hopper making like to a certain extent of like a progress but like this eventually but like I'm just like 11 totally finding out that basically about like the situation with that Hopper being like that of like the faceless monsters like daily faceless monsters like around with Hopper and that way like maybe at that point would be when like I'm just like 11 like Hopper totally would be also realizing the situation with that will and then maybe that way like 11 using 11 like superpower like usually precisely focusing 11 like superpower to like literally precisely destroy like the baby monsters that will be given from within Hopper as well as well and that way like 11 saving Hopper as well as like win and that way like at that point like maybe I was like Hopper as well as like win would be like losing the power to be able to like see the parallel world from like the real world and all that is also definitely an important scenario that I'm talking. Oh, so like the full of preemption right now, as for like Nancy right now, asking more Bauman about like the tape of like Owens being implementing in a like I'm definitely putting like Owens definitely right now would be telling Nancy and Jonathan that basically like that tape like that voice recording of Owens like won't be at all won't be at all intimidating at all. It's like the scenario that I'm doing. I'm basically like Owens right now telling Nancy and Jonathan that like they need actual evidence like photographs or like video of like that specific case uh, at like the end of the laboratory of Owens like this is what I'm doing like most likely right now Owens would be I mean like Murray Bowman would be telling them and Jordan that like they would need as like actual proper evidence that using this like they would at least have a hope of being able to like do anything against like Owens and his like team and his like kind of the laboratory if they even bring that to if they bring that evidence to like justice will be along the lines of so to developing like more moment right now telling them the jobs and I'm looking at the whole time period where like I think and I think like maybe like the time period right now where like all this like stranger things so all this like would be happening would be currently would be happening would be even though to be happening and everything would be like at that time period before like Photoshop was like thing became a thing. It's definitely very famous. So like I'm something like and before like Photoshop and all this like things became a thing. Like I'm looking like photoshopping and all that might not exist in like the current time period in like the world of strange things in like season two, definitely very correct. So this is in like season one, like basically even Jonathan had basically like the photograph that Jonathan had taken like basically Jonathan had to like basically dip it into that liquid and everything to like basically to have like that photograph be visible and all that. Like, and like so definitely like the time period will be old enough that basically it will be good for like for Photoshop even becomes a big step in the thing. So like I'm thinking like because of solely because of reason I'm looking right now. Bauman was likely telling Nancy and Johnson that they would have to like get actual visual rather than a voice recording. Like they would have to actually get like actual visual evidence, like pictures or like video recordings of like decade of like the and like I'm looking by in that recording that of like Owens even calling the talking about like the weeds spreading like I'm looking like by the weeds like he would be talking like about like the wine is like limited. So like I'm talking like from like the gate to like the barrel board within like the energy laboratory of like Owens like I'm looking from that gate like I'm that gate might also have like the property of like a tree as well with like filled with being filled with like wines and something like it would be that three like points of like the tree like that will be like attempting to like spread throughout like and take over like the entirety of the real world as well. Which like is definitely my brother embraces. So like the wines might have already taken over like the entirety of the parallel world and I'm looking like that wines will be right now. Once like the gate opens like I'm looking like the wines from like the parallel world would be like had might have been able to like access to the real world and I'm looking right now these wines will be trying to like take off like the real entirety of the real world and turn the entirety of the real world into like making it turning it into like exactly like the parallel world itself. It's also like a positive that and people about different that will be what like the wine to be attempting to supplement train. So definitely I don't remember just that like the actual evidence like a pictorial or like a video kind of like an actual evidence of like these minds of his gate within like the end of the laboratory like of like its movement and everything like basically like need to be captured and basically need would have to be provided in front of like the court as like evidence for them to even stand a chance to like bring down like Owen and like the remaining people of them and like they are along the lines I'm looking right now Owen's telling Nancy and Jonathan is like still the scenario that I'm looking and I'm looking with that like I'm looking Nancy and Jonathan it will be Nancy that will be like definitely determined even more than Jonathan Amber it will be Nancy that will be like the afraid to like really get back at and get some revenge at like the end of the laboratory and to like Owens and like the reunion of like the burners people for like Barbara Step and everything like that make the that in the number and as you don't think that eventually convincing Jonathan to like make a secret infiltration into that point laboratory somehow. Or like I'm using some sort of like a different strategy, exactly like how right now through like Nancy's own coding of like Barbara's mother, like using such a strategy, Nancy Johnson was able to like infiltrate into that trick even Owen then was able to like infiltrate into like one's laboratory. So like Nancy and Johnson like using a system strategy to like once again get themselves spot and that way to once again enter like the nuclear laboratory and basically them attempting to basically to like somehow like take video or like historical kind of like evidence through such a manner like that such strategy like I'm looking like Nancy and Jonathan like attempting to like achieve such a thing it's definitely and I'm looking like in that attempt like I'm looking like Nancy and Jonathan will be getting caught most likely is like the scenario that I was doing like them only that at that time like I'm looking like their laptop we are running out and like them only getting caught most likely like the CCTV this like the scenario that I'm looking over like I'm not looking at. So that's like the clear 3% right now as for like Nancy as well as like Murray Bowman like being previous to like know about like the 3 mile radius leak from like the energy laboratory of Owens like I'm which like only Hopper alone uh, had found out like I'm very importantly that Hopper that might have told like Nancy about the 3 mile radius leak from like the energy laboratory of Owens which definitely was very interesting them. So different like as like how Nancy and Murray Bowman might have found out about this, it might be through like the voice recording like Owens is definitely one of the reasons. Like I was like when Owens had literally the display code had Owens might have notified that absolute or confidence and was like that or confidence there might have been what might have right now backfired is definitely one of them. With like Owens like basically like showing Nancy as well as like Jonathan like that code would be trying to like, spread from like the gates and like basically or Owens team that basically using the play for and getting rid of it. Like I'm looking like during then like I'm looking like in that voice recording there might be more where like we might have told Nancy and Jordan as to like and might have given that specific details as for like spreading how we offering spreading having so far spread like the wines having so far spread to like the 3 mile radius surrounding like the energy laboratory and all that. Like I'm looking like Owen might have like naively revealed all that to like Nancy and Jordan, and might be only at that point that Nancy and Jordan might have found out, realized about this, and then was like, uh, and that way like through Nancy and Jordan, it might be only now that like basically even more Bauman might have found out about this, realized about this, especially when the embassy. So like, like even right now with like Nancy and Moray Bowman like feeling as if like they have finally found like the ultimate strategy to like bring down Owen and his like remaining team and basically his like energy level and everything like even while Nancy and like Moragoman so right now feeling so still hopeful like I'm the still like I'm the remains the attempt to like bring down like the energy level to bit only factoring and so I'm the only due to like there is a scenario where like I'm definitely Nancy Amber like Moray Bowman making a voice recording or like I'm looking like it would be like even more than Nancy Amber like it would be more Bowman that would be like making like the voice recording another voice recording and or like either Moray Bowman like most likely like Moray Bowman like making another voice recording and detailing about like this like area of like a 3 mile radius around like the energy laboratory belong to like Owen like basically having like this leakage and basically having like crossing like the all the crop and like pumpkin fields and all the crops getting poisoned and all that like that way like see that all that evidence like basically to bring down like the Owen Santos like his like team and his like energy level and everything that attempt they was not only failing because like I'm saying it's only due to like the current time period during like the time period of like the Stranger Things web series like second season like the that of like time period was like there has been no social media at all. So like I'm due to like the void of like social media and so like there only like only way to like bring down like the energy level would be to like basically to use like the connections of like Owens. Like Owens definitely would be not connections of Owens, but like the connections of like Mara Bowman. Mara Bowman definitely protecting would be having like connections to like people in like the news supporting field and everything. And so like I'm looking that has like in like one in like an eventual news live telecast like to for like Mara Bowman to like basically hand over his like voice recording where he would be detailing about like the payment radius like leakage from like the energy laboratory and to have that that voice recording be played in like the news without revealing Owen's identity because like I'm looking like Owens might without revealing Bob like identity because like I'm looking like Murray Bowman would be like definitely due to that extreme stealthy man of which like even in the place in which like Murray Bowman is staying like I'm looking like it would be extremely unfortunately it being like such a high priority for like Murray Bowman to like have like identity country. So like I'm looking like this number would be like the eventual plan like that Murray Bowman and then they are also will be coming to it and so like Murray Bowman like taking the decision that like he would make the voice recording because like of his because like Bowman would be totally feeling that his voice would be sounding so even more authentic as it like people might take his voice more seriously. The way he speaks more seriously would be along the line that Bowman would be feeling. So, so to like have this like voice recording of like Bowman like basically is he will be creating to be played on like the news on live on news like basically live audio recording of like this like audio recording of Bowman to be played on like live news eventually is that might be like the plan. And I'm looking like still, even though Bowman that way would be trying to like achieve that through like Bowman probably having like connections to like people in like the news field and then supporting and all that. Like I'm looking still I'm looking like being the scenario to be like Owen and just like teams like definitely Owen should be having like even more Owen should be like even more of like an influence in Twitter and would be having like an even more of like an extreme power and influence over like the news reporting area where I'm looking like Owen's like totally using all of his like power and influence to like basically to drown that voice recording of like format. It's like the little scenario that I'm so like even before like on the very day and that Bowman's like voice recording would be about to be published on that very day. News that available that while Bauman and Nancy and Jotham is only looking forward to basically that voice recording being displayed on like the news that day like even before right before that basically there will be like people having connections to oven that will be present in that news feed and in like by then like would be like simply reporting to like oven about like this move that format is like making like living the scenario that I was in. That's where I come from like when finding out about this before like the voice recording would be like telecasted live on like the scenario that I was in. That way like I'm like living the scenario to be like when using all of the like power and influence to like ensure that that voice recording is like destroyed and like brought down. It's like living the scenario that I was in. That way like while Bowman as well as Nankin Johnson will be totally looking forward to that voice recording being displayed on the news on that very day, like like that's not happening. And I'm wondering then, even though that Bowman will be having a copy of like that voice recording, still like certainly still that them not being able to them not being able like have that voice recording be displayed in like news, and that way like I'm still owing and just like energy laboratory and his like team like remaining safe it's like from like the public from like trust of the world of like living the scenarios that I'm also offering and my personal answer. Okay, so like the minimum instance right now as for like in like Owens like energy laboratory like the soil from like the farm which is there places the soil from within like to 3 miles radius like basically while being treated like the soil that are not treated in like different container as well like acting strange like I'm very good in the sense because of like it being like the soil they are being transformed into like the soil from like the parallel world. It's definitely the soil, even the soil in like the real world being transformed into like the soil in like the parallel world, into like the nature of like the soil in like the real world, like it's like property and like its behavior and its nature, like all being transformed and getting converted into like the soil of like the parallel world that we were mentioning. Because like I'm going to mention that like the reason for like the soil that weren't even treated like acting exactly like the soil that was treated in precisely because of like the parallel world itself being like a totally different the parallel dimension of like the parallel world itself like would be that of like the now memories where like I'm looking like except for like the human traveling into like the parallel world, like I'm doing everything else that exists in like the parallel world, like even like the very soul self of like the parallel world, as well as like the wine, as well as like the faceless monsters and everything else in like the parallel world would be all connected and united as one. And they would all be also connected by the now memories, like I'm looking like the parallel world, I'm looking their own be past, itself, and everything would be all happening together and everything this would be the reason like it would be that dimension of like the now memory and everything would be like the precise reason for like I'm looking like everything like in like the band but the wines whether it's like the wine whether it's like monster whether it's even like so it's like all of them would be connected together and that way like basically anything that affects one of them would be like also would be affecting every other things in like the parallel world as well. So definitely remember so like there will be always like that invisible kind of like a connection between everything that exists in like the parallel world and everything that exists in like the parallel world will be definitely having that their own bit of like even the soil will be having their own uh a tiny extent of like a consciousness with which like I'm like and that may be the reason for like the foods that are not treated as well reacting the exact same way because they would all be like interconnected and they would all be able to like see what like even like what like one of like the cases monster sees like they would all since they are all interconnected like they all the other monsters as well as like the vines as well as like the even like the soil in like the barrel would be able to like see and experience what like even a single monster like experiences. It's definitely my personal so there will be that absolute unity between everything that exists in like that parallel world. And this will be the precise reason for like what's happening right now, with like the soil acting in such a manner. It's definitely my personal reaction. And my personal reaction is that this will be the precise reason for like Will even revealing recently that basically that like Will can feel what like the shadow monster is feeling and see what like the shadow monster is seeing and all that. Like it will be due to that definitely like considering like the baby monsters will be like grown from the tension. So like I'm looking that way will be temporarily gaining that power that like basically like of like the monsters in like the of like the basic monsters, and that will be the reason for like being as well being like this the like the powers of like the basic monsters like they will temporarily gaining that, and that will be as well being part of like the house unity of like the everything that exists in like the parallel world is definitely the same. So like my theory and prediction right now is that it uses that absolute interconnection and absolute unity of everything that exists in like the parallel world would actually in fact also be their absolute weakness as well. Uh, on which like I'm looking like would be eventually getting exploited by like the humans into like basically eventually being like being the cause and like the reason that will be like eventually be enabling the humans to be able to like save the real world and bring down like the parallel world and everything. Bring down like the face monsters as well as the shadow monsters as well as the vines as well as like everything, the soil and everything that's like running through like the real world, like to reverse all that, to bring all that down, like everything like this exact factor of like that absolute unity and interconnection about like everything in like the parallel world would be what like would be really taken advantage of by the humans to eventually bring down like the once and everything of like bad ones, depending on the region. Because like I'm like even while also like spreading and everything of like the vines and like monsters and everything is happening, like I'm like in the parallel world, I'm definitely protecting there will be that absolute core of like the parallel world of everything that exists in like that parallel world. There will be like the actual core of it that would exist deep within like the parallel world. And even like it might exist like even in like the underground area within like the parallel world somewhere at some point location like there like this core where like I'm like to be the core area from which like everything in like the parallel world, the wine, like the monsters and everything might have spread. So like I'm looking like it will be like the destruction of like that form of like everything that exists in like the parallel world would be like the key element would be like the key factor that will be able to like undo and reverse and bring down like all the monsters and like the shadow monsters as well as base monsters as well as vines and everything to like destroy all of them together like I'm looking due to this like interconnected nature like I'm looking it would be the destruction of that core that would be like enabling like the humans to like finally fight back and bring down like the bring down like all the monsters and vines and everything simultaneously through a single attempt to like into the navigator level. But like that core itself would be totally alive and like would be like a monster kind of like a tree or something like would be like powerful living monsters kind of like an attacking kind of like a tree or something that would be another thing would be most likely the core and I would like the core itself would be like having exceptional powers to like defend itself from any attack. So like I'm looking it's eventually I'm looking towards the very end of like the show of like strange things it would be like I'm looking like copper and all of them like basically traveling to like the parallel world eventually to like basically once they will be figuring out about the core being like the keys to like bring down and reverse everything and save the real world and just like them all traveling to like the parallel world and them having that ultimate fight and then using all sorts of weapons and everything and so even like I'm looking like 11 as well as like Cali as well as like I'm looking eventually like the other experiments of like Pranur as well like I'm looking prepared in like the future pieces and I'm looking at them all like I'm looking like it will be elements like copper there will be that army of like 11 Cali as well as all of them and like 90% of and all of them like I'm looking like them all like collectively like will be fighting to like basically destroy that core and I'm looking like it will be finally them like even with like 11 and 11 as well as Cali as well as the other experiments subjects like individuals like their superpowers as well even while they would all be using their ultimate superpowers simultaneously against like the core monster like I'm looking still the core monster would be so extremely tough and then the extremely strong and would have such extreme high defense but like I'm looking eventually with their collective efforts that's like the real world will be able to fully get taken over by like the by like the uh, by like these like wines and like these monsters and everything at that very last second I'm looking will be when like everything finally Hopper and all of the team will be like around like 11 and Cali and all of them would be like finally succeeding in like strong section for of like this like monster specifically of like the battle bird and that destruction is what I'm looking right now would be like undoing instantly undoing everything and instantly taking the life of like all the physics monsters and like the shadow mon spider like shadow monsters and everything all together. Like them all facing the same pain, going through the same pain and going through like the same injuries and like going through like the same damage as well as like the going through the same death as that of like that death of like the core once like the core will be finally destroyed and will be dying. It's like the scenario that I'm so like I'm looking like the final scenario to be like a complete wipeout of like all ageless monsters and white and all sorts of like the shadow monsters and spider monsters all together by like the single act of like basically destroying like the four monsters of like the battle world. It should be definitely a movement would be deep underground within like the battle world, especially method putting the realm of the like living the scenario that I'm looking at. So it's like how like the real world is saved from like the battle world, from the monsters and everything to the battle world, certainly within the scenario that I'm looking right now and what's the ambition. So like the name of the reaction right now is that like that three like point like gate within like the energy level where Owen definitely won't be like the core. It's definitely meant to remember. So like I'm looking like even like the destruction of like that gate regardless of like even Owens and his like entire team, like even if they eventually able to like maybe like while things would be like okay, extremely getting out of control, like maybe even killing like the simple of them or actually trying to like maybe even destroy that case from like the parallel world, like the real world within like kind of level of their point. But like I'm looking even that at the would be totally failing because like I'm looking definitely it would be due to like the existence of like the core due to like the core monster like it would be like an even greater huge three monster like deep within like the uh, paddleboard underground is like the scenario that I'm playing. As long as that core monster really alive, like I'm looking like regardless of like I'm looking like no matter how much flamethrower that I'm looking like on Steam would be using, eventually I'm looking like I'm using all of the flamethrowers to like basically to destroy like the gate between like the real world and like the paddleboard within their lab. And I'm looking like regardless of how much flamethrower they use, like they won't be able to like destroy like the gate is like the scenario that I'm looking. And so this only due to that core three, like kind of like a master three within like the parallel one skill game. And I feel like I was like it will be only one like eventually towards like the final end showdown scenario once like that core three like monster which would be extremely huge would be like destroyed. That I'm looking like instantly as like the upper effect, not only like shadow monster, not only like the basis monster, but also like the gate from like the real world to like the parallel world within like the energy laboratory as well would be like simultaneously automatically getting destroyed. Just like the scenario that I'm looking for right now in my membership. Okay, so like membership right now with like Element right now putting on like the blindfold and basically like entering into like the dark void to like once again communicate with like the careers like right now as like Eleven's like working close towards like careers in the dark void. Like certainly I'm looking right now Eleven getting like the biggest shock because like I'm looking right now like scenario to be like Eleven will be working closer and closer towards like careers and like learn will be like standing right in front of like careers and basically would be calling careers like mama like at that point like I'm looking like careers like quickly like staring at like 11 and basically uttering like the word soccer is like the scenario that I'm wondering. That single word is all I'm looking like careers at that point will be staring at like 11 and like uttering like the word as like careers will be saying the word soccer at that point. It's like the scenario that I'm getting. And at that point, like, was just like 11 getting that would be such an extreme shock for like 11. And at that point, like, I'm like 11 probably straight away, like, from like the dark void, like, I'm looking like 11 straight away, searching for Hopper using 11 from the dark void. And at that point, I was like 11 shockingly witnessing through the dark void, like, 11 totally witnessing like the extreme danger situation, which is like Hopper like 10. And I'm looking like at that point, like, definitely to save Hopper for 11 like save Hopper, that would be like definitely that one thing that like I'm looking right now, like the race would be desperate to happen right now. Definitely, like I'm that way, like I'm looking like even at that point itself, like realizing what her mother is trying to like tell 11, like trying to do like basically I'm really like I'm looking at that point itself, I'm suffering like 11 totally like determined to like say pop up like I'm like 11 totally running away from like her race before and I'm looking like 11 like totally still being able to like using her superpowers like I'm looking like 11 totally flying yet with that altitude like through the trees like 11 for flying using her directing her superpowers to like the floor something and really 11 only perfectly being able to like make it in that exact time to be able to like and solely to like 11 like proper being saved is like the in the scenario that is sitting onto a frame. Okay, so like the minimum ambition right now as for like in Korea's memory, like the past area, I basically try to like infiltrate into like hopefully infiltrate into like corners of the laboratory to like save Jane, like at that point, like I was thinking like in like 11th, like James, like home, like they believe that other kids that is present will be definitely Cali is definitely not the temple. So like uh, so like my temperature said back then like I was thinking like runner might have been conducting that the very same experiments on both like 11 as well as like Cali simultaneously, depending on the temperature. And I was like 11 might have performed way better than Cali, and I was like 11 like 11's experiment might have became a success while like Cali's experiment might have still ended up being a failure. And I'm in that way, like I'm looking like 11 might have like remained in like that in different kind of state, while like Cali might have been abandoned. It's definitely not the same. So like I'm looking like that way, like I'm and I'm also talking like unlike in like 11 case, like I'm talking in the case of like Cali, like I'm talking like Cali might have been like so like my brain was just like unlike in 11th case, like I'm looking like as like how Cali might have ended up in that as like an experience of taking like or another maybe level. It might have been either through like I'm looking like Cali situation might have been like Cali might have been like when runners might have affect Cali, like Cali might have been formed at that point. It's like one of the scenarios that I'm looking over, like I'm looking it might have been like runner like tricking and might have that Cali might have been an orphan and might have been like an orphanage and that was like Pranab might have showed up with like a woman and then from this like woman member from his like lab and might have tricked the people at the orphanage and might have totally adopted Cali and like in the name of adopting Cali, like Pranab might have brought Cali to like the end of the laboratory, and that might be how like Cali might have ended up with like Jane back then in like the room of like uh, within like in that rainbow room in like front of end of the laboratory back then like the laboratory scenario that I was told about and my picture. And so like my very just that like in Cali's case, like I'm looking like it might have been like a very simple situation of back of like careers but like I'm looking yeah in the case of Cali as well like I'm looking like while like the experiments within like the laboratory might have been a failure and once like they might have been like rejected like I'm looking like uh it might have been after that like after they might have that will left the lab that I'm looking like that might have been like through like a delayed manner that they might have changed their superpower to the new experiment. So like that might be the reason for like Cali right now hosting superpowers while like I'm like while the experience might have been down on Cali in like the lab like everything Cali might have not changed like any sort of like uh, telepathic powers and telekinesis powers or anything even after the experience might have been what might have happened with the minimal premise because like it might have been due to like the powers even while possibly through the experience having been born within like Cali still it's the remaining dormant and that might have been like the victim case in that of like experience which like the dormant powers might have only changed to like surface as like years past might have been what might have happened with the single experience. So like I'm thinking like after like Cali might have been a like might have been rejected from like from the end of the lab. But like once like 11th experience was like something like another runner might have probably uh, felt that he got what he wanted and basically he might have straight away uh, rejected Cali and Cali might have once again ended up in some like homeless kind of like a situation. And it might be that way like initially Cali might have ended up being part of like the group of like robbers, which are also like an into scenario that I'm posing for us what like what might have happened. So like what might have happened in like the past of the new premises. So like I'm like definitely the fact of that I'm also right now the current would be like literally bringing Cali into like forming into being part of like the group of like Microsoft and 11 in like the future in like the recent future and would be the sole factor that basically that 11 and Kelly were childhood friends while they were as part of the experiments like while they were trapped as like prisoners in that like a rainbow room within like prisoners and the laboratory like the fact that like 11 as well as Kelly were like childhood friends like I'm certainly definitely main those skills that I'm definitely putting to be like a scenario in this like after like 11 would be run back to like the after like the reuniting between like 11 and Mike and everyone once like you will be back to like the gang of like Mike lives and when like eventually at some point I'm going to put like them totally running into Cali at some point is like the scenario that I moved with and like even though none of them will be like knowing who Cali is like I'm going to and I'm going to be most likely during that after like 11 reunited with Mexicans and others, like I'm like the most likely I'm looking definitely would be while they would all be going up to like the arcade, like I'm looking like to play the arcade games, like I'm looking it would be at that point that I'm looking like 11 would be, and all of them would be running into Cali because like, and shortly finding out that Cali is like Mad Max. Definitely, definitely a critical mention that it's Mad Max would definitely be Cali, and I was like that way. It, I'm definitely predicting that right now, since that basically it will be at that location of that arcade place where like I'm like the reuniting of like 11 and Cali could be taking place. It's like a scenario that I did. So that would be like a shocking reuniting of or like 11 and Cali. It's like the scenario that I'm looking and them shockingly realizing that like they are like they were like childhood friends. So definitely my best friend. So like definitely I'm the like since like back then like Cali was like the only friend that 11 had. Like since like it was like just Cali as well as 11 like trapped in that rainbow back then like I'm definitely Sally as well as Eleven might have wanted so much and they might have been like best friends back then. Like best friends and like the only friends like that they both had back then might have been each other, especially when trying to go definitely because of that, like I'm like definitely I'm going to like an extremely emotional reunion eventually in like into that arcade location between like Cali and 11 happening. It's like the eventual scenario that I was thinking, and that will be how like I'm going to make Cali will be eventually like totally like leaving that gang of like the robbers and eventually ending up being part of like the friendship gang, like 92% of the and 11 and 98 with like saving the scenario that I'm looking out the ring and my football game watch. Okay, so like definitely I'm 300% right now with like 11 right now, like shortly finding out what like free sunflower rainbow like four to the right, like three to the left, like four to six was like this like that career repeated was like really seeing like the part of careers like I'm living right now especially feels like just now like basically career system had revealed to like 11 that basically that it's not just these words alone that like career says that at times career says different words as well. And the thing, those different words would be totally things like the current word that like Eleven had about like the rainbows and sunflower like basically has is like connected to like the past of careers. Like definitely I'm still thinking my book that like careers would be totally able to see not only her past but like also her future. It's definitely my book. So like I'm looking like the other set of words that like career system had told 11 that like career sales would be all connected to like the future of like careers and it wouldn't just be connected to like the future of careers alone, but like it would have like extreme relevance to like the future of 11 as well. So definitely remember to mention this might be the set of reasons for like careers right now as like 11 in like the dark void had basically sort of in front of careers like right before finding out the past of like careers like basically the like careers like looking at 11 and basically telling 11 that basically that 11 while 11 said that told the race in the dark when that she's home that the race like staring at like 11 and saying no that sharp no would be possibly because of like the race being able to like see the future and basically the race would be definitely well and fully aware that like now is definitely not the time for like 11 to basically to return back home because like if 11 return back home and try to like stay and live in like the race home right now as a thought like definitely literally 11 would be like getting found out and captured by like the Owens and his like remaining team members and once again getting in person would be one thing that the Reyes might have only seen in the future and hence like would be absolutely sure of definitely remember the himself. So like this might be the reason for like the Reyes right now in the dark world shouting out to like 11 that no that like now like 11 is not hope that basically because like I'm written definitely careers might have seen the future and specifically my preparation that future like to uh the- for like the eventual destruction of like the energy laboratory of like Owens and his, like to for like Owens and his team all of them to be brought down like I'm written like for 11 if for that to happen and that way for 11 to like finally be free like for all that to happen definitely Hopper's like role would be extremely relevant and I'm afraid that would be one thing that the race should be absolutely sure of so like and this one might be the reason for like the race right now shouting at like 11 and from the dark side and saying no that 11 is not back home. It's definitely my friend. It's because like careers would be also aware of like the current might have seen the future and would be also aware of like the current extremely dangerous situation of like Hopper right now. It's definitely my friend. So like I'm saying career as would be like deep down feeling that absolute disturbance and frustration and a bit afraid to like get 11 to Hopper as soon as possible so that like Hopper can be safe. So that like through Hopper like 11 would be on the eventually like the future would be actually properly able to like return back home to like career as like career not same. It's definitely without having people coming, without having like one sort of like teams coming after to like after 11. It's definitely my thought on the reaction that is sitting on the reaction by them. So like you know, the right now, but like through careers like 11 right now, like seeing past and basically even seeing like Cali as well. Like basically in like the past of career, like I'm definitely I'm like 11 right now would be like remembering that the days while like 11 was like trapped in that rainbow room while 11 that whole moments of like not moment while that entire time while 11 of like 11 that 11 had spent with like Cali and basically about the great friendship and all that they had while they were like in that kind of like a space and everything. And I was wondering like the pain of like basically losing Cali once like 11 like experience might have ended up being what that was like at that point like basically Pranav like forcefully taking like the only friend that like 11 had like Cali forcefully away from 11 and basically that pain that 11 had felt back then one thing Cali forcefully being taken away from the 11 and all that like I'm thinking like right now 11 might have regain back all that memories right now with the so like definitely I'm looking right now since like even with like Mike's situation right now with like the 11 like totally that thing that Mike has totally replaced, finally given up on 11 and replaced 11 like Maxine and all that. Like I'm looking still even with like I'm looking like even after I'm looking definitely I'm looking right now like Cali would be like of like a finding Cali out like finding where Cali is would be like I'm looking like from this point on would be like a seriously high priority for 11 within 11 might is definitely my preference. So that law best friend of like 11 would be desperate to like want to like find her and see her and meet up with her again. It's definitely my reaction. So definitely I was regardless in the apartment from campus bring like the whole 11 and Mike reunion happening like a real zone at like 11 would be like finding out about like proper dangerous situation and like 11 would be heading off or to like as like 11 would be making it and if you are Hopper would be struggling and like as like 11 would be able to say Hopper like I'm doing like during that time like I'm doing the even though I'm the super king like the 11 and Mike reunion happening I'm doing still even after that like I'm doing like 11 not forgetting about like Cali and I'm like 11 would be like totally determined as well in her mind to like find Cali as well. It's definitely remember every time like 11 even so 11 won't be like knowing her name as it being like Cali and something like exactly like how 11 back then only knew 11's name as like 11 numbers like 11 would be only knowing that the number of like carry. So like I'm like 11 talking at that point like would be actually revealing to like Mike about like the girl this that was like the best friend of 11 that while 11 was trapped in like turn of the laboratory and all that like 11 totally revealing to like Mike and that 11 telling Mike that 11 totally definitely want to like find her best friend from like the past and all that. It's also like Eleven only expressing this to that so like Mike is also like living with the language. So like I'm looking still I'm looking like it will be totally when Mike as well as like Eleven is least expecting that but I'm looking like it will be through like the location of like arcade like they are that I'm looking like the reunion between like 11 and Kelly would be happening with like the scenario that I'm looking and at that point I was like it would be Mike alone that would be like realizing that like actually like what's going on that whom that other girl is while like Lucas and Dustin and they will be like totally unaware of like who exactly Cali is. Other than Cali being Mad Max like the window scenario that everybody was bringing up for him. Okay, so like the minimum 3% right now is that basically with like George as well as like so right now using the shovel and entering into like the upside down like the ground area like I'm searching for hopper like I'm eventually I'm definitely George as well as Pop getting into trouble themselves as well like getting caught in like the wine for like I'm getting like running into like one of the cases want to watch like so also like an scenario that I'm trying so and I'm wondering what they would be in danger, like I'm wondering, and they, Bob would be struggling to like save Joyce, like I'm wondering if it would be certainly Joyce that would be like first getting into danger, and Bob would be only struggling to like save Joyce. And definitely Bob, even though he would be scared, and right now the thinking not abandoning Joyce. It's like the scenario that I'm wondering him just really trying to like save Joyce and him as well getting into trouble. And I was wondering at that point I was wondering Phil would be able to like send like Joyce to front of Joyce in trouble, and that will like Phil as well as like Mike quickly running into and then bring it to like that underground upside down area, and like will using like usually being able to like make it towards like where those as well as forward is struggling. And I'm looking like definitely I'm looking like none of like the wine would be like at all attacking will at all like the scenario that I'm looking. So, like I'm looking all these points and all this like flower like thing within like that underground area that can really sort out the poison like thing and all that. Like I'm like none of them would be like seeing Will as like an enemy. It's definitely my information because of like the definitely about my information because of like most likely like the baby wants of like most likely going for steroids from within Will like I'm like definitely like all of these vines and like all of these like monsters and everything would be seeing Will as like, even though Will is in like human form, like they would all be able to like sense like the monster from within Will, and like they would all be seeing Will as like one of their own, definitely member of. So like I'm just like as Will will be showing up along with like Mike, and I'm looking like Will. Most likely, I'm different. Maybe it would be like it being like maybe I'm different like it being most likely like wine again that might be like getting hold of like Joyce as well as Bob, and like would be about to like the wine could be about to like fully like swallow like both Joyce as well as like Bob when like I'm like Will and Mike would be showing up, and I'm also like seeing Will like and I'm different as like Will would be like, and those wines not all attacking Will's like the scenario that I was so like I'm just Will only along with like Mike pulling out like the wines and maybe being able to like save like save those as well as Bob like scenario where maybe like they wouldn't even have to like pull out like, the wines like maybe as like will be like showing up like like the wines like proceeding by themselves and basically making way for like Will to it's like also like a little like I'm doing that definitely that way like I'm looking like Will with like Will and Will self like I'm looking like Joyce as well as like of being safe and I'm sort of uh like and I was bringing from that point on like it really leading the way and I was sort of like all the wines and everything like moving aside like while Bill would be walking in like the scenario that I'm looking. So that's also like the scenario that I'm looking. So like so only it will like Mike and Bob and Joyce, all of them remaining safe while they would be exploring in that underground is like upside down area trying to like find copper like is another that I'm doing. And definitely even though they would still want to find copper and find them say copper definitely because of like them all knowing like how much like copper has helped them out like but like I'm for instance like Bob is like totally another and so the like Bob totally being adamant and like consistently telling them that like they need to like try to like escape out of like the underground upside down area to like making it feel like surface and they need to like survive like themselves and they need to like escape instead of like searching for Hopper. But like I'm looking definitely those less Mike only the remain to like find and save Hopper and that way like I'm looking maybe through Bill's help alone like I'm looking maybe like them saving Hopper. It's like eventual possible scenario that I'm doing. But like I'm pretty sure my friends that like by the time they will be finding Hopper like I'm looking Hopper only definitely exactly like in Bill's situation back in like the battle world like I'm looking like Hopper as well would be having that would be like an exactly trap like situation with like that thing over like Hopper's mouth as well. Like the scenario that I'm in that way Hopper as well would be like even though after being saved like I'm saying Hopper as well would be slowly going to like the exact same situation as Will went through and will be able to like thoroughly relate Will as well as Hopper will be thoroughly able to like relate to each other and able to like that way Hopper as well gaining like the power to be able to like see the parallel world from like the real world. Exactly gaining the very same kind of power to that as well as like in the scenario that is sitting on the ring. Also, like the minimum creation right now as for like is the great number of bands of like from the energy level performance like right now going up to like the pumpkin will it will be the sort of like their soil testing through which like they might they would definitely figure like the soil in like the real world like being converted to spreading from like the energy lab getting converted into the parallel world soil is definitely one thing. So like I'm to destroy all that soil those different they might have brought like all this like there will be great number of people like each of like those bands will be filled with like the armament of like Dynasty, Stephanie members, so like I'm sort of like of like Owen's team, Stephanie members, and they were each and every single one of the members of the ring will be armed with like flamethrowers, Stephanie members, so like I'm sort of like their plan, their intent behind showing up would be to like burn all that soil and that poison crop to get rid of like the evidence of like the poison crops as well as to burn all that soil that has been transformed into like soil of the battlefield and all that like everything in that 3 mile radius surrounding like the energy laboratories to burn and destroy them all. Like they would be their plan. So like they will be by now would be fully aware as for like all the like everything from the battlefield having this weakness towards like teeth because like the passenger with the passport is like so extremely cold all the time, like I'm like about the about it like weakness to heat, like they would be well and fully aware of that. So like I'm going to like the flame or to like to fully like wipe out like so that entire like that spreading in that 3 month radius area from like them level will be like one plants for minimum doing what like I'm doing right now is that with them showing up to like one field that I'm doing right now is that like I'm doing like we're totally shouting out to them and basically showing them that basically that and I was going like work well and Mike like maybe like subtly trying to shouting out to like those team of with them basically telling them to like basically like save like offer as well as like the parents will be along lines like will be telling and everything like but like at that point I was like it was only at that point like I'm like the Owens team would be softly finding out that area where like offer has that like basically through there like them softly would be only at that point things finding out about like this like extremely huge maze, underground, upside down maze that like happens. So like until that like present and until that point, like they would be only thing that basically would be just like the soil, the surface area alone in like a 3 mile radius that have been converted into like the upside down. That's getting converted into like the upside down would be along the lines like own streams might have thought, but like I'm on being like the underground maze like pathway like with having like with that entire pathway having like vines throughout and being exactly like the upside down like that being like a tool shop for like on centers like like so scenario that I'm going to select them all like literally women straight away ordering like this like same to like basically they would have only brought gasoline as well especially on the so like I'm going to like to destroy like that entire maze underground upside down maze like I'm like ordering them to like basically use gasoline throughout like that entirety of like that maze is like the scenario that I'm looking so like at that point I'm looking for will as well as like my will get only extremely worried for like Joyce as well as for Bill would it only worried for like Joyce as well as dogs. It's like the scenario that I'm so like then not they would be like we're trying to like shout out to like Will as well as Mike would be just really trying to like shout out to like Owen to like telling them to like first save like their parents and all that the new information. But like I was saying like Owens won't be at all feeling paying any heed to their words and I'm like Owens like ordering one of his like team members to like to put like Bill as well as like Mike in like uh, into some kind of like a state in like the car or to lock them up in like the one of like the vans or something and really at that point like I'm looking at and then Owens will be continuing on with like ordering his like team to like basically to like basically put gasoline throughout like the entirety of like the maze like to put gasoline throughout like the entirety of like the maze like underground maze like area all throughout like the 3 mile radius like the that on giving such an order and I was like all those like armament of like all the teams like come all the great number of ones like all them while everyone like flame force like basically entering into like that underground maze like basically and person bring like them totally like like putting gasoline throughout like the exploring the entirety of the underground path while fantastically like putting gasoline over there and I'm also like usually while this will be happening on one side like I'm looking like George as well as Bob will be like really trying to find Hopper so like I'm looking like Mike will as well as like Mike will be totally extremely worried and like I'm looking like will be totally scared for like George and Bob and Hopper like looking after that everything and I was like initially the whole that detective phase like they will be totally like the team members will be totally skilled that like detective phase like them exploring like the underground maze like place and I'm looking like there will be a great number of like the team members as well so like I'm looking like them all actually like putting gasoline on that entire like that underground upside down area and I'm also like and so like I'm looking like while Will would get only and Mike would be fearing like the possibility of like Bob as well as Joyce as well as Hopper ending up dying like I'm thinking by then like I was like as like the gasoline you almost fully filled or like the entire field with the name like past like I was like Joyce as well as Bob to be like struggling their way into like eventually finding Hopper. It's like the scenario that about it. So like them totally finding Hopper and was like as they would be trying to like save Hopper, like I'm looking like Joyce as well as Bob as well getting caught in like the vines at that point. It's like scenario that I'm so like exactly like Hopper them as well getting caught in like the vines and as like the vines would be trying to like swallow them as well. Like that point is when I'm looking like finding like the team of like Owen like would be like putting gasoline and exploring it while putting the gasoline, like them totally running into them, hearing like the shouts and screams of like Joyce as well as like Bob. It's like the scenario that they will be getting caught by like the wine. So like I'm looking like those team members of like going like at that point on seeing that right in front of them, like basically I'm like them deciding to like save Joyce as well as like Bob. So like that way like Joyce as well as Bob as well as like Hopper as well getting saved by Owen's team itself is like the scenario that I'm looking for. So like I'm looking that way like Joyce as well as like Bob as well as Hopper being saved, and I'm looking like those team members of like Owen's like basically bringing Joyce, Hopper as well as like Bob all the way to like that area where like Hopper had initially darkened like the community to enter into like the underground upside down. So like that way, like Joyce, Hopper, as well as Bob getting saved by uh, of all people of like a bunch of like team members like the scenario that I'm so like that way like Will and Mike being totally relieved, and once like Hopper, Joyce, and Bob would be like getting rescued like like at that point like Owen's like totally giving the order, and then because Clive themselves like like they would have like Owen's team members like the number three would have totally completed like their putting up like the Japanese or like the entire team of like the maze like three place like the three match three like the scenario that I was like so like there will be that many great number of like army match like that will be doing that work is like the scenario that I'm doing. So like then like I'm looking like on giving like all of one like all of the remaining team members will be going back to like the office, like I'm going to give them the order, and I'm looking like them like totally putting on like the fire like or using the flame for into that underground area, and I'm looking like literally like I'm looking at that, and that the effect that underground is like like basically getting burned, and like the flame like passing through the entire effect like area, and like eliminating all those like vines that are like through like in that underground area, all of them getting caught in like the fire, and all of those vines like ending up dying. All those vines and that underground passageway that is spread like I'm looking like all like collectively through like the gasoline and like flame like I'm looking like all of them like dying out like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking like at that point like Owen's totally feeling proud, and as if like they really he has like finally destroyed like the spreading of like the virus, successfully destroyed the spreading of the vine. And with that like satisfaction kind of like the feeling like I'm looking like Owens like basically like telling Hopper that basically and Hopper at that point maybe I'm considering would be barely conscious like or like I'm feeling like that Hopper at that point would be unconscious like I'm but still that the Owens like totally saying of the to like Hopper and like the Hopper is like saying the scenario that I'm looking, and at that point like I'm looking like Hopper Owens like maybe in a funny manner like maybe like telling uh Hopper that is the Ocean one or something around the line that name is Ramesh. And Hopper at that point will be like extreme giant range like on like the into scenario that I'm thinking. So like that way like Owens actually like even though the villain like Owens are also getting like kind of like a hero moment as a brief hero moment as well as like also like an evil person scenario that I'm doing. And while that Hopper and all of them will be saying that basically kind of also the only thing that basically they have contained like spreading still able to like even with the planes destroying all that while still amplifying like the gate will be spreading downward even from like the energy level range like the gate will be like spreading more and more downward and then with like even more points from like the gate will be like still slowly once again starting to like, spread even through different directions again so like about the level. So like maybe I'm looking it to be through that very same underground maze or like I'm looking like that vine spreading the vines itself would be understood like would be intelligent enough that I'm looking like the vine spreading downwards and I'm looking like creating another set of like an underground like upside down like passageway even beneath like the already existing underground upside down passageway like another spreading set of like spreading of like the vines happening. It's like without like own realize like in the point from like Hopper realizing this, and by the time they would be realizing like it being too late, and in that second spreading of like the vines and of the like even surpassing like to 3 mile radius of like the initial spreading so also like even the scenarios that I was looking at the game. So like so this is according to the frame of the different like what can explain right now would be like destroying all that spreading of like the vine in that means like underground path or like the three and that like the 3 mile radius surrounding like the of the laboratory through like through the like gasoline as well as happening like the flame floor and all that like I'm looking like so that way like I'm looking like Once on top of doing that, like once would be also clearing all that evidence in like the surface as well, just like the poison pumpkin as well. That as well, like I'm the like points that I was watering thing to like get rid of and basically that way. Or like totally for like the time being for like a while, like that whole spreading out like that leakage from like the energy laboratory getting completely eliminated and wiped out, and so like the entire dream is really being clean, getting created. Is such a man of like the scenario that I'm doing. So like I'm doing that as well totally ending up totally destroying like the strategy of like Nancy and Bauman to like basically to most likely through like Bauman's like voice recording through like having it like get played on like the news would be like the most likely their plans to like that way to like using the evidence of like the leakage of like around like 3 mile radius of like the energy laboratory to like trap and bring down like once and it's like payments to have like the energy laboratory is for a shutdown. Like it's been their attempt as well. I was wondering like so if failing with like even before they could do anything about the exact number like points like clearing up like all the spreading and leakage in like the 3 mile radius. Like and also like any winter scenario that I'm looking that way like I'm to be like Nancy as well as Bong and like being totally like disappointed and feeling defeated as for like their strategy getting like that's all that through such a manner. Also, like any within purpose scenario that I'm looking on the frame interruption. Yes, so like the new interruption right now has got like exactly like how like the soil experiment like basically with like the wine and like the underground upside down like basically getting hurt by the plane or also hurting will as well. You see hurting will as well. Like I'm looking definitely still my doctor mentions that basically solely due to like the existence of like the gate within like 10 of the laboratory of oven like basically that gate like definitely would be still like solely as long as like that gate would be like definitely would be kept alive like I'm looking like even well even though right now the will would be like totally suffering and basically will straight away getting like taken to like the end of the laboratory of like points rather than the other hospital like the scenario that I'm looking at. So definitely the members like even though Bill would be going through extreme pain, like members because of like the pain of like the that like the wine could be feeling through like the flame through like Bill would be going through that exact pain. So like I'm yet like I'm like Bill still different like Bill still would be totally surviving like so like I'm like while like the entirety of like that underground passageway would be like the wines in that and that affects underground means that would be that destroyed using the flamethrowers like that entirety of like the time until like that full destruction happens like like uh, Bill would be constantly suffering and like yet like my remember shows that like solely due to that case within like the energy laboratory still like being that bridge between like the real world and the real world and due to his like presence in like the real world and to the purpose of like minds and everything and that case present in like connecting to like the real world as well. Solely due to that reason like I'm looking like Bill still being a like survive like scenario that I'm is all occurring and my boyfriend. So like I'm looking like Bill only being in like cannot be such kind of like the state within like the energy laboratory for like maybe a couple of weeks like also like an officer that I'm right. So like I'm like and I was during that time like Owens and his team would be so and totally taking advantage of such a situation to like basically to maybe that do some experiments on will as well as also like about the development. So maybe I'm also like Owens and his team like still maybe seeing another like 11 still being alive is also like about that evolution. So like I'm looking like maybe Owens even like take advantage of such a situation to also try to attempt that basically that like this continued experiment of like run up. It was to like create like the ultimate weapon through 11 like I'm looking maybe I'm looking like maybe that experiment might be right now discontinued or like I'm looking maybe even Owens might be having like the plans to like continue that weapons through like basically Owens might have already captured like maybe like the tiny dark like level like tiny monsters like maybe at least one of like those monsters maybe like in some secret location in like the energy laboratory points like Owens might have captured it and might be experiment on it like one particular that I'm looking or if like Owens haven't done that like I'm still like Owens like only using taking advantage of like the uh, unwell situation of Bill, which would be like in an admitted kind of situation like the Nazi laboratory to perform on like wellness really trying to take advantage of that to like really perform experiments to like turn Bill into like into that another person like a faceless a monster like that. It's also like about what that I'm doing that way for like like make money and person and so like maybe even attempting that deciding thinking of like attempting that but like even before account will be able to like do that like definitely will be saved from like the another level way. Just like very good scenario that happened. And that will be through like even making a return to that pop up house and that will like during like the whole interaction like I'm pop up only reading about like which situations to like even not only at that point and like maybe like at that point 11 using like the dark word like using that going up to it and basically even that way using telepathic powers as well to through like word maybe that figuring out what exactly is going on with with and then in that way maybe hop up figure so 11 figuring out maybe about like according to the positive like the monster baby monsters going from the temple hopping like all the systems and issues is good and that way like I would like hopper and that hopper like totally saving will and rescuing will from like the energy level and basically was like driven else like driven totally saving destroying like the game monsters that were driven from within will and that way even saving them. So like also like invented scenario that I'm in that way will is back to like normal. So also like invented scenario that I'm also scenario that I'm doing.